All right. Happy birthday, Stan.
Where is he? How come all of a sudden you can't hear him?
Well, he's muted for one thing. You also can barely see him.
You're muted.
Still muted, Stan. All right.
That's what happens on your birthday.
I guess. All right. So we'll begin. All right. This is material that we have studied in the past, but I think one of the beauties of doing Torah study, I mean, we have the same portion year after year. People study the Talmud and then they start again. So there's not a problem, or as I sometimes say, the material is always the same, but we are different. Mm-hmm. So we bring maybe a different perspective to it from year to year. And I also think sometimes when we're studying something in the context of looking at it as part of the weekly cycle of readings versus looking at it as a holiday reading, it also in some way takes on a different valence. Okay, so we'll look at some of the selected Rashis for the reading that we read for the seventh day of Pesach. Okay, so Vayihi b'shalach paro et ha'am v'lo nacham Elokim derech eretz plishtim ki karov hu ki amar Elokim pen yinachem ha'am berotam milchama v'shavu mitzrayma. Okay, so the first Rashi, Vayihi b'shalach paro v'lo nacham. Okay, so again, this is, there are some of these that the English translation, while not inaccurate, doesn't really convey the problem that Rashi is trying to solve, because he's solving a grammatical question with the Hebrew. Okay, and so he's looking at the word velo nacham, and it's hard to understand, right? Because if you look at the word, okay, so we know that Hebrew works according to a shoresh, right? According to a root, and the root conveys the sort of the basic meaning, right? And then the root is conjugated, right? So if you look at the word Naham, it's not clear exactly what it means. It's not even clear exactly what the root is, right? We have a root Noach, Nun Vav Chet, and the Vav can disappear. It often does disappear. And the root, the shorish Noach, means like to make things easy or to rest, okay? Or it could be the root Nacham, Nun Het Mem, which means to comfort, right? But it doesn't seem to mean either of those, right? And we actually know what it means, right? I mean, because we know the story. So Rashi says that lo naham means lo nehagam. He did not lead them. And he brings another verse from Exodus where it means the same thing, and then he brings a verse from Proverbs. And again, an orchestra conductor in modern Hebrew is a manche. Okay, so we see the same root as in the word lo naham. It's just an unusual root. It's an unusual root. And to tell you the truth, I'm actually not sure what the shoresh is. I know what the meaning is, but you wouldn't necessarily know this was a problem unless you knew enough Hebrew to sort of pick up on that. All right. So the next comment, ki karovhu, right? So it says, God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, ki karovhu. Okay, so that's what Rashi is commenting. And, so if you look, so the translation says, for it was near. Okay, in the JPS, it says, although it was nearer. Okay, what's the problem? What does the word key normally mean? Right, I mean, it's a fairly basic Hebrew word. Marcia, you surely know what the word key means.
I'm drawing a blank.
Okay.
Because.
It means because,
Yeah.
right? So if you want to translate it literally, it says God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines because it was near. And then you say, but wait a second, that doesn't make any sense, right? That's like saying, I didn't walk to the shul by way of the walking path because that was the quickest way. So instead I went all the way around Del Castle Road, and instead of walking for 800 feet, I walked for 3/4 of a mile, right? Well, you know me well enough that I would never do that, right? So ki karovhu, it seems not to make sense, right? God didn't lead them that way, although it was nearer, right? Generally, we want to go the quickest way, right? We want to go the quickest way. So Rashi explains that because it was nearer, v'noach l'shuv b'toha derech l'mitzrayim. Okay, no, it does mean because it was nearer, because therefore it was easier to go back that way to Egypt. And then there are a lot of midrashay agadah. There's a lot of agadot that explain that. But so what is Rashi saying here, right? I mean, I think this is a sort of a psychological explanation, right?
Well, if God is omniscient, then he knew that they would be going through a crisis and would want to go back to Egypt. He already anticipated that.
All right, possibly. I mean, I think we need to sort of look. I mean, you've landed on the classic conundrum of, normative traditional theology positing that human beings have free will, and yet God is omniscient.
Right.
And it's very, very hard to have those two things living comfortably side by side, right? Because if God knows what we're going to do, are we really free to do that? So let's blanket. You're not wrong, but let's blanket that. I mean, I think that there is something else. There is something else psychological at work here as well.
Rabbi, wasn't there, I don't know if I'm out of context or out of time order, but wasn't there one of the reasons that he didn't let them go the quickest way was, I'm thinking of a couple of things all coming together. He wanted them they had to know more about life outside of slavery in Egypt before they could go into Jerusalem and survive as a new society. But also that, wasn't there something about they had to go through 40 years for the sinners, so to speak, to die out?
Right,
Those
but
are just,
we haven't gotten there yet.
okay, so that's what I'm out of
We
time.
haven't gotten there yet. Here, I think, all right, it seems to me, right, that it is much easier to quit something that you have just begun
Right.
than to quit something that you have already devoted effort to. Right now, that gets us into the sunk cost fallacy, right? Where we pursue things that are fruitless because we've already spent a lot of money or we've spent a lot of time and we don't want to waste that money or that time, so we wind up wasting more money and more time, right? But here, I think what Rashi is saying is that in God's mind, right, if it's easy for them to leave, it's easy for them to go back, right? And if they and here I think it is true. I mean, I think that we value things more if we work hard to attain them than if they're just given to us. Okay, and I'll give you a very recent and very mundane example. Okay, talking not about this Rashi, but about the other Rashi. Okay, my Rashi. We just bought him this puzzle thing. It's 3 bottles that are on a spool, right? And then there are whole plastic bottles. There are holes in the lid, and you put treats in there, and then they've got to figure out, and eventually they figure out if they spin the bottle, right, the treats will fall out. Well, Rashi was having trouble, so Kelly went to show him. I said, no, right? Let him figure it out on his own, right? That's the whole point of it. And within an hour, right? And so then we finally had to take it away because he was gorging himself on the street, and we were afraid that he would throw up or get sick from it. But I don't know, but I think he felt, smart. I figured this out, right? I didn't have it handed to me, right? So in that sense, I think that there is a certain value to that. Okay. The rest of this verse is pretty much the same, right? They'll see war. And so if you look at the next one, so here Rashi is saying, all right, and here the point that you made about God's omniscience does come in, right? Because God is saying to himself here, if when he led them around in a circuitous route, they said, let us appoint a leader and return to Egypt, how much more would they have planned to do this if he had led them on a direct route? Okay, now, of course, this hasn't happened yet, right? But, I mean, pretty much all of the book of Numbers, right, is one account after another of a rebellion against Moses, right? And so God, I mean, it's interesting because you can't, I mean, I've said this before about other things. You cannot think about this too hard, because if you think about it too hard, you just get caught up, in a sort of in a cyclical conundrum, right? I mean, God knows that they're going to rebel, so he takes steps to forestall the rebellion, knowing that it's not going to work. Right. So you can't, as I say, you can't think about this too much. Right. But he's afraid that they will, they will reconsider. They'll have second thoughts about um, about uh, about leaving Egypt. Okay, so let's skip a little bit, okay, um, to verse 18. So God led the people, Vayasev Elokim et ha'am derech hamidbar Yam Suf v'hamushim alu v'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. So God led the people by way of the desert, the Red Sea. Yam Suf doesn't really mean Red Sea, and well, I'm just going to say Hamushim. I'm not even going to translate the word Hamushim. The Israelites went up Hamushim from the land of Egypt. Okay, so Vayasev hisibam min haderach pshuta l'derech ha'akuma. He led them around from a direct route to a circular route. Okay, now Yam Suf, right? So here Rashi has to explain two different things, because when it says Derech HaMidbar Yam Suf, a participle seems to be missing there, right? If you translate it literally, all right, the way of the desert sea of reeds or Red Sea, right? So Derech HaMidbar Yam Suf, what does that mean, right? In other words, it seems to be, right, it seems to be missing a participle, or it seems to be missing a directional word here, right? So what does it mean? Rashi says it means le Yam Suf, okay? To the Red Sea. It's missing the Lamed, all right? He led them through the desert to the Red Sea, or the Reed Sea, Yam Suf, right? But we don't yet know what the word Suf means. So Rashi explains that. Suf hu lashon agam shegedelim bo kanim. Okay, a marsh where reeds grow. Okay, and then he brings, the where Moses' mother put him in a basket, also floating him in the Suf. Okay, so Suf is it's like a marshy. I mean, I can see it in my mind what it looks like, right? Because I grew up in New Jersey. We have these in New Jersey too, right? But although they're cattails rather than reeds, okay? But that's what Suf is. It's like a marshy type of thing. Okay, so any questions or comments so far? All right, let's continue.
Rabbi Arian, I do have a quick one.
Yes.
We are getting literally into the reeds.
Right.
Down to the very nitty gritty. And it seems to me that with all of this continuing challenge to try to understand purpose and direction, I thought that by definition, whatever the doubts, the uncertainty, even the upset and the anger of the Hebrews, that it's a foregone conclusion that they're going ahead. I mean, this may be a bunch of thoughts, but I don't think there's any sense, is there, that truly a directional change is going to occur?
Well, I mean, Rashi seems to think so, and if you look at, so we'll look at the next Rashi, and this may resolve that question in a way. And but look, the fact of the matter is, again, if you look at the book of Numbers, right, they are, I mean, you've asked Steve a really profound question, okay? And I one of the most profound sermons I ever gave in my life attempted to resolve that question, okay? But if you look at the entire book of Numbers, it's just one rebellion after another. And many times they're saying, let's go back in Egypt, right? Or, oh, we wish that we had never been left Egypt, or life was so good in Egypt and now it's so terrible. I mean, even as soon as they get to the shores of the Red Sea, what do they say? Right. Was it for lack of graves in Egypt that you brought us out here to die in the desert? Right. And if you read Freud's theory, with which I don't agree, but it doesn't mean that there's not something to it, is that the Israelites actually killed Moses, right? But they are constantly wanting to go back to Egypt. Okay, and what is Egypt? Okay, I mean, why do they want to go back? Why do they want to go back?
It's all they know.
It's all they know. It's familiar.
Right.
Right? It's familiar. Right? Being a slave may suck, but there's job security. Right?
Unless there
No,
isn't.
I'm not joking, right?
Unless there isn't.
Slaves don't get laid off.
No, they just get killed.
Well, no, but it's what they know. I mean, why do people return time after time after time to an abusive spouse?
Right.
Because it's what they know, right? And everybody, I believe everybody has an Egypt of their soul, right? Which, and I've spoken and I've written about, and really I can't recommend strongly enough Michael Walzer's book. It's a very short book, Exodus and Revolution, right? But Walzer says that there are three eternal truths of the Exodus, okay? One, wherever you are, it is probably Egypt. Two, the promised land does exist. There is a better place. Three, the only way to get there is by joining hands and going through the desert. There are no shortcuts. Right? And that's the problem. And that brings us back actually to the first point, ki karovhu, right? The people want a shortcut. There are no shortcuts, right? There are no shortcuts. And I think that there is something there, Steve, you're going to be sorry you asked this question. I think there is something in the American soul that loves shortcuts, right? And I am just as guilty, right? I mean, the comedian Stephen Wright, that guy, with the monotone one-liners, right? I made instant coffee in my microwave and I went back in time. Right?
Sounds like Ben Stein.
What?
He sounds just like Ben Stein.
Yeah, yes. But that's the thing. We don't want to wait. We don't want to wait. We don't want to do the hard work. We want to go from slavery in Egypt to the promised land, and we want to skip the 40 years in the desert. But you can't do that. You can't do that, right? And so Steve, to answer your question, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that they want to leave Egypt and they want to go forward. I don't think that at all. And I think that's what makes the story so profound,
Yeah.
right? Because you imagine yourself in the story, right? What is my Egypt? What is my promised land? What is my desert?
Rabbi, talking
go ahead.
about what they know, what they have known. We all have, regardless of whatever the adverse things are in our current situations, we all have a comfort level to some degree because it's what we know. It brings to mind, and you often joke about this, but I have these images from, not talking about the accuracy, but when Cecil B. DeMille did his 10 Commandments, the video really brought some of this, even if symbolically, to the forefront. It brings to mind when Moses knows that, or God tells Moses, and Moses knows he's not going into the promised land, and he tells, what's his name? Who's his successor? I just got it.
Joshua.
To go and stand up high where the people can see them, the people can see him. So they'll have confidence in where they're going or where they're heading. And that's a thread of trying to get people over the fear of what's ahead that they can't see, that they don't know, and loosening the bonds of what they have left behind. And I think we all feel that when we go from being single to being married, or from a teenager to an adult, from a first job to a new job. I think there's a shred of that in everybody's life.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, I think it's a profound psychological truth, right? And this is the power of the story, right? What's my Egypt? What's my promised land? What's my desert?
Yeah.
Right. And it works for individuals. It works for groups, right? I mean, I can tell you that there are so many jokes and cartoons and so on about, search committees for either for rabbis or
Right,
pastors. It doesn't matter, right?
Right.
We want a rabbi who will inspire us with the vision and the courage to remain precisely the way we are.
The same thing in selecting a principal.
Right? With a principal too.
Oh my
right?
God, it's terrible.
Right? Because we know we're in Egypt, but it's comfortable and the desert is scary.
There's
Right.
actually, my therapist introduced me to a movie called The Way Back from 2010,
Yeah.
where one of the four people who actually survives the whole trip from Siberia to the Tamale Mountains actually goes back to Russia in order to fight the Germans.
Uh-huh.
Like, it's unbelievable. Like, he makes the whole journey, losing friends left and right. But when there's a goal in mind, then yeah.
Right. And then when you lose faith in the goal, that's when it becomes unbearable.
Right.
Right? For sure. And we all have these stories, right? We all have. I mean, I lived on a kibbutz for a number of years. Okay, and it was a hard life, but it was worth it when I believed in what they were doing. Right? When I lost faith in what they were doing, it became unbearable.
I need to say something very, very heartfelt and very personal, and very presumptuous. But there are some of us who feel the same situation during COVID with your efforts to find a way not only to keep us close to religion, but to keep us close to each other.
Mhm.
And I see a very significant parallel there, because talk about a desert and talk about whatever. I mean, that's COVID. That's the year plus that we have all been living. And for many of us, you have been, the confidence to go forward, that there will be an end to this.
Well, thank you, but now we're dealing with the question, right? I mean, when we see that when we see that the end of the desert period is approaching,
Egypt doesn't look so good anymore.
well, I don't know. See, this is the question. This is the question, right? I mean, this is the question. And so what do we do? What do we do with that going forward? Okay, Steve, have I made you sorry you've asked that question yet? Okay, so now let's look at the next Rashi. Okay, so he's looking at Hamushim, okay, which the English translation says armed. Okay, now this word Hamushim is complicated, right? Because what is the shoresh? What is the root? Hamesh, right? And Hamesh means 5. Right now, we also know in modern Hebrew, right? So like if you've ever spent any time at all in Jerusalem, you know there's a place called Givat HaTachmoshet, which means ammunition hill, right, from the 6-Day War. And so it's not surprising that Rashi translates Hamushim as armed, right? But you're still saying to yourself, but wait a second, what is this Hamesh, right? What is this 5 doing in there? Okay, so Rashi is going to give you the pshat, right? And then he's going to give you the drash. Okay, the pshat in this case means the contextual meaning. Okay, in other words, let us say what the author had in mind. Okay, what the author had in mind. And here he says, Ein chamushim ela mezu yanim. All right, in this context, in the pshat context, it can only mean armed. Why armed? Right now, this is an interesting explanation, right? He connects it. Why did they have to leave Egypt armed? And Rashi says it's precisely because they were going through the desert. Okay, what does that mean? Well, if they were going through civilization, right? In other words, if you think about it, it's actually true. If you're planning for a road trip, right? If you're planning for a road trip, you got to figure out, like, what are the supplies that I need to take with me versus the supplies that I can pick up on the way, right? I mean, if I'm driving from here to Boston, right? I know that I can find kosher restaurants on the way, right? I can stop in Cherry Hill. I can stop in Teaneck. I can stop in New York. I can stop in New Haven, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have to bring all my food with me, right? Because I know I can get kosher food on the way, right? If I'm driving from here to, let's say, Charleston, South Carolina, same 10-hour drive, right? But I'm gonna bring food with me, right? Because I'm not confident that I can pick up kosher food along the way, right? So that's what Rashi is saying, right? If they had gone through civilization, they wouldn't have to bring everything with them because they can pick up whatever they need along the way. But if he's traveling in the desert, then he has to bring everything with them, right?
So
I mean,
are you saying that the word armed means provisions, not weapons?
no, it means weapons. All right. So then the next sentence in Rashi is saying, okay, but why does God have to make this clear? Okay, and it is because later on in the
Oh, yeah.
story,
Yeah.
they are going to be fighting
Right.
battles.
Right.
And God doesn't want you to say, wait a second, where did they get the weapons from? Right? Where do they get the weapons from? Because we know they had them because they brought them from Egypt. Right? I mean, it's the same when we discussed the golden calf, right? And I said there's plenty of blame to go around, right? Including for God, right? Because what is necessary, right? I mean, you could have all the desire in the world to make a golden calf, right? But what else do you need besides the desire to make a golden calf?
But you gotta have gold.
Gold, right? Where do they get gold in the desert?
Well,
They
they
don't get
didn't.
gold in the desert, but they don't need to get gold in the desert because they already have the gold.
Right.
Why do they have the gold? Because God told them to embezzle it from the Egyptians.
But
Right?
but they didn't have weapons as slaves when they were in Egypt.
Well, we don't know that.
Well, we don't know that, but presumably they could have gotten the weapons the same way they got the gold.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? I mean, that's a good point. That is a good point, right? That is a good point. That, you know, if they were where did they get weapons from? It's a good point. I don't know.
Yeah, but were
Right.
some weapons at that time were relatively simple, a slingshot to make.
Right.
Yeah, but
And they would have knives,
Right. They certainly
and you
would have
could
had
easily
knives.
make a spear.
Right. But that's not the point. The point is that Rashi is troubled lest you think that it was superfluous to include the fact that they brought weapons with them.
Okay.
Right? And he says it's not superfluous because later on they're going to have weapons, and God doesn't want you to be troubled by the fact, hey, where did they get weapons from in the middle of the desert all of a sudden? They brought them with. Okay. So that's the pshat. That's the contextual meaning, right? But if you go down towards the bottom of this explanation, right, where it says another interpretation, you see where it says that? Hamushim means divided by 5, meaning that 1 out of 5 Israelites went out and 4/5 died during the 3 days of darkness. Okay, so Hamushim in this case really does connect to Hamesh. Okay, only 1/5 of the Israelites went out, and the other 4/5 died. All right, there's other midrashic explanations. Not that 4/5 died during the plague of darkness, but that 4/5 didn't want to leave. They didn't want to leave. They preferred to stay. Right? They preferred to stay, and we see a hint of that in the book of Genesis. Right? When God says to Joseph, don't be afraid to go down to Egypt, because I will go down with the people and I will bring them out. Right? Go down with, why go down with? Because they're going voluntarily. Bring them out, because I got to bring them out by force.
Mhm.
Right? Because they're not going to want to come. They're not going to want to come. Right? So, and again, it ties, right. Why wouldn't they want to leave? Because it's what they know, right? Because it's what they know. It's comfortable, right? So, but Rashi clearly indicates that this is a midrashic explanation. It's not the literal meaning of the text. Okay. Let's go on to Joseph's bones. Vayikach Moshe et atzmot Yosef imo. Moses took Joseph's bones with him. Ki hashbea hishbia et bnei Yisrael more, because he made the Israelites swear. Pakod yifkod Elokim. God will surely remember you. Etchem v'halitam et atzmotai mize itchem. Bring up my bones from here with you. Okay, so hashbea hishbia, right? This is a double expression. We know that, right? It means it's just add emphasis, right? So he not only did he make them swear, but he, firmly made them swear. He insistently made them swear, right? To bring up, he made his brothers swear that they would make their children swear. Okay, so that's another possible doubling, right? That not only did he make them swear, he made them swear that they would make their children swear, right? That it would be not only a vow of that generation, but a vow going down through the generations, that he would bring his bones, that they would bring his Joseph's bones with them to the land of Canaan, right? Now, the question is, so Joseph made his brothers swear that they or their children or their children's children would bring his bones with them when they left Egypt, right? What's the problem? When Jacob died, what did they do?
They went to Canaan to bury Jacob.
Right. They went up from Egypt to Canaan. They buried him in Hebron in the cave of Machpelah, along with Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, right? And Leah. So the question is, right now, Joseph's obviously not dead yet, right? Because he's making his brothers swear to that when they leave Egypt, they should bring his bones, right? So the question is, why did he make them swear that? Why didn't he just make them swear that when he died, they would go bury him in Canaan right away, like they did for Jacob,
Well,
right?
they didn't
That's
do it.
what?
They would have a problem because Joseph was a ruler at the time Jacob died. This is what it says, but obviously who's going to succeed Joseph, and they may not be allowed to do it.
Right, exactly. That's exactly it. I mean, it's a good answer because it's something that's always troubled me. Right? It's something that always troubled me, right? I mean, why are Joseph's bones hanging around for several hundred years instead of being, no, I mean, but he, I mean, I guess it was a compassionate thing on Joseph's part, right? I don't want to make you swear to do something that you might not be able to do. Right? I mean, we don't.
But like Marsha said, it's also a promise that this way they'll come out. Meaning, if they buried him when he died, like they did Jacob, then they can say, we already fulfilled that oath. We can stay here until, until the next Moses comes around.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I mean, it's hard for me to see that the motivation for the Exodus was simply to bury Joseph in Eretz Israel, but yeah, I mean, it could have been, but I don't think that's what Rashi's saying here, right? He's saying that, I was able to make sure that this happened because I was in charge. right? But when I die, I don't know who's going to be in charge, and they may not let them do it. So I don't want to make them swear to do something that they might not be able to do, right? Anus Rachmana Patre, right? If there's force majeure and you can't do something, then you're exempt from it, right? I mean, we've invoked that principle a lot in the last 13 months, right?
Yes.
Anus Rachmana Patre, right? God forgives us because we don't have any other choice, right? I mean, but it's interesting. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you don't want to make people swear to do something that they can't do. I mean, you all, with the exception of Rabbi Goldman, know about this because you know my whole story with when my mom died.
Right.
And 30 years before she died, she said that she wanted to be cremated. And I told her that she had to make my brother responsible to take care of it because I couldn't do it. He didn't care. It didn't bother him. Right. And I wasn't gonna stand in her way. I wasn't gonna prevent it from happening, although it turns out that I could have, but who needs
Right.
that family service?
Right.
But I didn't know at the time that I said, but don't make me responsible for it. Right. And all, I mean, I'm sure that you can think of a time in your life when somebody said to you, promise me you will do X, Y, Z. And you said to them, don't make me promise because I don't know that I'll be able to. Right. I can promise that I'll make my best efforts. I can promise that I'll do it if I can, but don't make me promise that I'll do it because I might not be able to, whatever it is, right? Probably everybody has had a situation like that at some point in their life, right? All right, we'll go one more to chapter 14, verse 6. All right, V'yasor, this is talking about Pharaoh. V'yasor et rikbo ve'et amo lakach imo. So he, meaning Pharaoh, harnessed his chariot and he took his people with them. V'yasor et rikbo hu ba'atzmo. He personally. Okay, now, what's noteworthy about this? I mean, Rashi just says him personally, as if it's self-evident that that's somehow remarkable. But what's remarkable about
Why
it?
didn't the servants do it?
Why doesn't he have servants do it? Right? Why? Right? I mean, Pharaoh. Why? Yeah. Right? I mean, it'd be like saying, so the president started up the limousine and drove. Right? The president doesn't start up the limousine. Right? The president calls down to have the limousine brought around. Right? Pharaoh doesn't harness his chariot. He sends the servant to harness his chariot, right? But no, Pharaoh does this himself, okay? And I don't know where the original of this appears, but I read this in Sefer Haggadah by Bialik and Ravnitsky, where he talks about this, and he talks about when Abraham and Isaac went to Mount Moriah for the Akedah, right? And it says early in the morning they got up and Abraham saddled his ass. V'yachabosh et chamuro. And they asked the same question, right? I mean, Abraham has servants, right? I mean, he has servants right there with him, right? He has servants right there with him because the very next sentence he says, you wait here. You wait here. I and the lad will go and we'll worship and we'll come back to you. Right? So he has servants. So why does he have to saddle his ass himself? And Pharaoh has servants, right? Why does he have to saddle? Why does he have to harness his chariots? So it says, Ahava milkokelet et hashura, sina milkokelet et hashura. Okay, both love and hate are such strong emotions that they, I don't know exactly how to translate milkokelet et hashura. They upset
Disrupt the proper order of business.
Right. They
Fight
they
each other.
upend the proper order of business,
Right.
right? They and so Abraham, either he was in such a hurry to get it done that he didn't want to wait for his servants, or he wanted the merit of doing it. And Pharaoh was so motivated by hatred of the Israelites, he didn't want to wait for his servants to do it. He just took care of it himself, right? And some of you have heard me say, right, when you are a nonprofit organization, not that Pharaoh was a nonprofit organization, right? But there are two ways to accomplish any task, right? The hard way, which is to find a volunteer to do it, or the easy way, which is to just do it yourself. Right? And so Pharaoh took the easy way and he did it himself. Okay. So, and he took his people with him. Okay. Now I love, the first time I read this a couple of years ago, it reminded me of then current events. All right. He attracted them with words. We suffered. They took our money and then we let them go. Come with me, and I will not behave with you as do other kings. I will drain the swamp. Right? With other kings, it is customary that their servants precede them in battle, but I will precede you. Okay.
On to the capital.
Right. Let's
I will
all go
walk
to the
with you.
capital and I will go with you.
Right there with you. Yep.
I will be right there with you. Yeah. Right. But it's a classic demagoguery, right? Right. We suffered. Look how we suffered. Right. Look how we Egyptians suffered because of the Hebrews. Right. But it's the Southern myth of the lost cause.
Yeah.
Right? The Southern myth of the lost cause. And I have to tell you, if you think about it, one of my favorite musical groups since I was 13, 14 years old is The Band. Right? And one of their greatest songs was The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down.
Oh, wow.
Right? And those of you think about it. It's all about how the Confederate soldiers suffered.
Yeah.
Right? It never occurred to me really until this summer how morally problematic that song is. Right? But it's the same demagoguery. Right? The average Confederate soldier was not a slave owner. Right? He was as much a victim. Right? He was as much a victim of the slave owning class. I don't want to say as much. Not as much, but he was also a victim of the slave owning oligarchs.
But Rabbi, you can, like you say, you don't want to get into the weeds, but all of a sudden this thought flashed through my empty brain that was the statement made over and over and over again by the German people.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Right? The Jews are our misfortune.
Yeah.
Right? Right?
No,
We were
but take
we
it
were
one step.
stabbed in the back during World War I by the Jews and at Versailles, and that's right, absolutely.
Yeah, but I was thinking yes to that, but I was also thinking that I'm almost afraid to say this because I can contradict myself, but I'll do it anyway. The average German, the kids were conscripted into Hitler's youth from such a young age that there was almost like no free will, and yet that's the argument that basically washed away any sense of morality, because it's just like saying, well, I was just taking orders, or I was ordered to, or I would have been killed if I didn't. So there's a million scenarios with the exact same point, I guess you would call it.
Right. Right. But no, it's exactly right. So in that sense, Pharaoh, right? Pharaoh is a classic demagogue, right? Now the difference is that when Pharaoh said, you know, I will not simply send you into battle, but I will go into battle with you.
I will
Right?
proceed.
He actually did so.
Yeah, he
Right?
said, I will proceed.
He actually did so. Right? So, you know, some credit to Pharaoh. No, seriously. I mean, you know, he was, at
He
least in
walked the
this sense,
walk.
he was a man of his word. Huh?
I'm saying he walked the walk, not only talked the talk.
Right. He walked the walk. He didn't just talk the talk.
No, that's right. Well, leaders in even up through medieval times, they led their armies. They weren't behind their armies.
Right. Right. No, and you know, absolutely. I mean, it's like also one of my favorite movie scenes. I guess it's from, I forget, the St. Crispin's Day speech, right? Where King Henry is leading his people into battle,
Yeah.
right? And that's, you know, that's the difference, is that, you know, today, at least in this country, right, we send people to fight.
Mhm.
Right? The leaders send people to fight. I mean, you know, for the most part, you know, I mean, with Biden being the exception in that regard, right? I mean, he didn't serve in the military, but his son did. Served in Iraq, you know? But for the most part, right, the leaders of both parties never served in the military, and their kids don't serve in the military. And would the stakes be different, right? Would different decisions be made if, you know, if their own kids' lives were at risk and not just the lives of other people's children?
Right.
I don't know. All right. Anyway, thank you for participating. Hag Sameach.
Chag Sameach,
And
everyone.
enjoy the last few days of Pesach, and see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Thank you,
Good night,
Rabbi.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.